January 6, 2017, U.S. citizen and Iraq war veteran Esteban Santiago gunned down 11 people at a Fort Lauderdale International Airport baggage claim. Is this just another case of a mentally ill lone gunman snapping in a final act of desperation? A tragic product of a toxic society? Or is there a nefarious guiding force behind the repeating patterns of shock and violence that we see? The 26-year-old Santiago was born in New Jersey, but moved to Puerto Rico when he was 2 years old. He later joined the Puerto Rican National Guard and served with them for a year in Iraq. He returned from Iraq in 2011. 2 years ago, he moved to Alaska, where he lived with a woman and a child and worked as a security guard. It was from there that Santiago spiraled down a dark descent that resulted in a less than honorable discharge, as well as arrests for domestic violence. In August of 2016, he began telling his family members and his employer that he was hearing voices. Just a few months later, in November 2016, Esteban walked into the FBI Anchorage field office and complained that the CIA was using mind control weapons on him. I submitted Freedom of Information Act requests to both the CIA and the FBI regarding this, and if anything comes of it, I will be updating it on my channel. After Esteban's visit to the FBI office, he was hospitalized for 4 days for mental evaluation, but he was then released and his gun was returned to him. Esteban's story shares many elements with some of the biggest mass shooting cases in the United States, all part of a strange pattern connecting the FBI, the CIA, and claims of mind control. Given the CIA's history with mind control experiments, it's not entirely out of the realm of believability to think that the CIA might have played some part in these shootings. Reports of Santiago's mental health in the media drew comparisons to another mass shooting gunman, Alexis, whose story eerily parallels that of Esteban Santiago. Much like Esteban, who was an Army reservist originally from New Jersey, Alexis was a Navy reservist from New York City. Alexis was honorably discharged after a pattern of misconduct, although the Navy had originally sought to kick him out with a less desirable general discharge. Much like Esteban Santiago, who, after going AWOL several times, received a less honorable general discharge for unsatisfactory performance. Both Santiago and Alexis both began hearing voices shortly before their shootings occurred, and both sought help from officials when the voices became too much for them to handle. As a result, both were hospitalized for mental issues due to hearing those voices. On August 7, 2013, a Rhode Island police officer responded to a call made by Alexis. Alexis, who was staying at a hotel, claimed that people were harassing him using microwave weapons. The police report states that, oddly enough, it all started when Alexis had a confrontation with a man in an airport, who Alexis then believes sent 3 people to follow and harass him. Although he didn't physically see these people, he could hear their voices in his head. On the night he made the call to the police, he had changed hotel rooms 3 times in an effort to escape the voices, but it was to no avail. According to the report, he heard the same voices talking to him through the walls, floor, and ceiling. Alexis also noted that the people were using some sort of microwave machine to send vibrations through the ceiling, penetrating his body so he couldn't fall asleep. In the weeks following that incident, he was treated at 2 VA hospitals in Rhode Island. But it was 40 days later, on September 16, 2013, that Alexis walked into a Washington, D.C. Navy yard equipped with a rifle and killed 12 people. On the stock of his rifle, Alexis had carved, "My ELF weapon." ELF stands for Extremely Low Frequency, which has been harnessed by the military for use in some of their weapons systems. DARPA's own website makes mention of fear-inducing rhythmic low-frequency sonic pulses. The Department of Defense classifies these types of weapons as non-lethal weapons. This includes acoustic weapons and microwave-directed energy weapons, such as the LRAD and the active denial system, which many of our local law enforcements have already been equipped with, thanks to the military.
About 7 football fields to give it some perspective. It can deter individuals on a military perimeter all the way up to a riotous crowd, all without permanent harm.
It only penetrates 1/64 of an inch of your skin, goes very shallow into where your nerve receptors are, and there's no permanent injury caused by it.
Most described it as feeling like a hot oven or grill being opened up.
It is something that, once again, probably the safest.
Aaron Alexis, who himself had a Department of Defense clearance, truly believed that he was being harassed with these types of weapons. He went so far as to contact the Freedom from Covert Harassment and Surveillance organization. The director of that organization, Derek Robinson, exchanged several emails with Aaron Alexis prior to the Navy Yard shooting. Robinson stated that Alexis clearly showed that he had come under physical attack from microwaves and was experiencing voice-to-skull technology, which is a form of non-lethal weaponry that utilizes microwave auditory effect. This consists of audible clicks or, with speech modulation, spoken words, induced by pulsed and modulated microwave frequencies. The audio is generated directly inside the human head without the need of any receiving electronic device.
Right in the center of their forehead, inside their head, they'll hear Bach, just like they would with their ears, but the ears aren't involved.
It wasn't through my ears at all. It was basically, it felt like kind of it was coming from the middle of my head, no direction, and it was clear. So not through my ears at all, which is pretty cool.
Now we can do this wirelessly with microwave. So there's lots of ways to do it, and this just gives a very simple sort of workbench model that gives the principle so people can understand, yeah, you can really do it.
Robinson went on to say that Alexis believed he had come across some information at the Washington Navy Yard that convinced him that someplace inside there was a source of the ELF targeting, establishing a motive for his later attack at that Navy Yard. Another mass shooting gunman who exhibited similar behavior was Jared Loughner of Tucson, Arizona. In January of 2011, he killed 6 people at a supermarket and injured 14, including Representative Gabby Giffords, who survived a gunshot to the head. In the months leading up to the Tucson shooting, Jared Loughner uploaded some strange YouTube videos to his channel, which remains online to this day. He makes many mentions of mind control in his videos, stating that he is the mind controller and that the government is trying to use mind control. On a personal note, I'm actually from Tucson, Arizona, and I was living there when this shooting took place. Although Jared went to the same college as me, we never crossed paths, but I have known people who did have classes with him. I knew the cabbie who picked him up and took him to the shooting. He was actually a person of interest for a while after the shooting took place because they saw him on security camera and they wondered who this other guy was. He was just the cab driver that got called to come pick up Jared. At that time, I wasn't yet concerned about conspiracy theories and false flags, so I hardly made any mention of this on my channel. I was too concerned with all the UFOs I was seeing out there in Tucson. And I'm not saying aliens, I'm just saying the government has some really strange crafts that they fly out there, and that's all I know. But back to Jared. He started exhibiting violent outbursts during his classes at Pima Community College. This ended up getting him expelled. So much like Aaron Alexis and Esteban Santiago were discharged from the military, Jared Loughner was expelled from college. After committing the shooting, he was later diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. He was experiencing hallucinations, although it's not clear what those hallucinations were. He was after that forcibly medicated and drugged at a mental facility for over a year, until he was deemed competent to stand trial, at which he pleaded guilty and avoided the death penalty. Something interesting about Tucson, Arizona is that it is allegedly a hub for MKUltra experimentation. MKUltra is the CIA mind control program that began in the early 1950s and allegedly stopped in 1973, although many believe it's taken on other forms and other names in different projects since then. On YouTube, you can see testimonies from MKUltra victims who are testifying and telling their story in court. And I have to say, I believe them to be truthful. I don't think this woman here was lying when she said what she said about being in Tucson, Arizona as a victim subjected to this mind control program.
I was a subject in radiation as well as mind control and drug experiments performed by a man I knew as Dr. Green. I was a subject from 1966 to 1976. All these experiments were performed on me in conjunction with mind control techniques and drugs in Tucson, Arizona. Dr. Green was using me mostly as a mind control subject from 1966 to 1973. His objective was to gain control of my mind and train me to be a spy assassin.
Definitely watch that whole video for the details of her testimony. So while that's no type of definitive proof that Jared Loughner was an MKUltra subject, it definitely does add to the conspiracy theory. I could go on about some of the other mass shooting cases, like James Holmes, who was found drugged like a zombie in his car right after he supposedly committed the shooting at the theater in Colorado. Some of the witnesses there said there was more than one shooter, which is also another common theme across all of these mass shootings. Then there's all the older cases that happened before I was even alive. Those are definitely worth looking at. In my research for this video, I came across a lot of interesting information from other people, but this is some of the telltale signs of a false flag operation, mostly when referring to the mass shooting type of operation. The uniform of all black camouflage trench coat, all the way up to what looks like full riot gear. We didn't see this with Esteban Santiago in the Fort Lauderdale shooting. He was just wearing regular clothes. And Jared Loughner was also wearing normal clothes. But the San Bernardino shooters were wearing the black camouflage uniform. James Holmes was wearing an extravagant black full body armor, from what I understand. The Sikh temple shooting, there were reports of 4 men in black body armor. The official story ended up being just one guy. And along that line of thought, more than one shooter will often be reported. They'll even be searching for a second or third gunman long after the first one is caught or killed. This happened in the most recent shooting at Fort Lauderdale. I was listening live to the scanner radio, and the fire and rescue team said that there was multiple unknowns with guns, and they were looking for people for quite some time that day who they thought were still at large, even though they had already caught Esteban Santiago. And there were reports of shots in another hangar at the airport. Another telltale sign of a false flag operation is that the shooter had previous history of mental health treatment. Now, I don't know exactly what the connection is there, but there is some connection. James Holmes sought treatment too. So did, like I said, Santiago, as well as Alexis, and basically all of them end up going to some type of counseling or psychiatric help before they really go downhill and go crazy, supposedly. Jared Loughner was expelled on psychiatric grounds, which required him to get a psychiatric clearance before he could return. That's when he entered the system. That's when you make your background available to them, and then they can pick you out. So are the psychiatrists playing some type of part in all of this? It's a theory that once you enter yourself into the psychiatric system by giving them your information and all that, and they know you're questioning your own sanity, they might pick you as a target based on that if you fit all the other criteria that they need. So be careful with that. There's definitely some type of connection there. A fellow inmate of James Holmes told the media that James Holmes thinks that his psychiatrist set him up and brainwashed him. Another sign of a false flag is an incredible marksmanship ability on the part of the shooter. In often cases, they just happen to be ex-trained military, coincidentally. Another sign is lack of any believable motive for the shooter's acts. I don't really get if somebody is, they're going to go out in a blaze of glory and they're going to shoot up random people. If they're mad at the government and the world, why don't they go shoot up some politicians or something? I'm not condoning or suggesting that, but it makes no sense that they would turn the guns on their own fellow human beings who are just trying to make it in the rat race. It really doesn't make much sense. Only in America does that really happen. And it happens a lot because there's something else going on with that. Another red flag that it might be a false flag operation is previous ties to the military by the shooter. We definitely saw that in a couple of these cases. Another sign that it might be a false flag is that the FBI or the feds had spoken to this individual in the past and they just dropped the ball and they're just playing dumb about it. The FBI really, come on. You guys either aren't doing your job or there's something completely sinister going on here. If you have contact with every single one of these gunmen beforehand and you don't catch what they're doing, I believe they probably coerced them into the situation and set it up somehow. Another red flag is a strange, expressionless look on the shooter's face during the rampage, or an inability to remember the act afterwards, which is an indication of mind control. This person also noted that an early start time to the massacre so that the story dominates that day's headlines. And of course, sometimes around these events, you'll see a drill mimicking the shooting, almost identically happening nearby on the same day or within a recent time span. I don't believe that happened in Florida, but it has happened in several other cases. This all needs to be considered as part of the apparatus of U.S. domestic social control, as that's what these incidents are ultimately leveraged for. You saw what happened with the Ohio mass stabbing at the university. They dropped that story really quick. Had they chosen to give it more attention, it could have been as big a deal as any one of these other incidents, but they chose not to. The media, that is. The media ignored it. So it's really the media chooses which incident becomes a big deal and shapes all the narratives and causes an uproar and laws get changed. Whereas in Chicago, they have mass shootings probably every day and they don't care about those. So it's all very ironic and stupid, but it's not like we all don't see through that. So it's pretty funny to see what the mainstream media is going through right now. They're hurting and they're gonna have to go through a transformation in order to remain afloat, and that's gonna be a transformation for the better if it happens. All right, I'm gonna leave you with this fellow here who has some interesting things to say. I found this video while researching. It's from a public town board meeting and he's just kind of awesome. It has to do with John Lennon's Killer, and this was recorded in 2010. Alright, thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, please subscribe and all that nonsense. Thanks for watching.
I read the news today, oh boy, about a lucky man who made the grade. Kids, pay attention to the words, ideas, and wisdom of my other big hero, Winston O'Boogie, a.k.a. John Lennon. Finally, the truth is beginning to come out. Phil Strongman, in a new book, Lifetimes in Assassination from the Blue Coat Press, clearly shows that the hogwash-laden low-nut theory once again holds no water, it's full of holes. For example, Chapman was no disgruntled fan. He was not a John Lennon aficionado at all, and never was. Never had Chapman owned a single, an LP, a book, or buyer about John Lennon. Also, he was not a celebrity stalker looking for fame, evidently, because he pled guilty to avoid a trial, and we haven't heard a peep from him for 30 years now. Instead, after shooting John Lennon, Chapman waited calmly like a zombie for the cops. The records showed that Chapman had mysteriously visited Beirut, Lebanon, then a CIA hive of activity, and one of their assassination training camps. Chapman had probably been recruited in Hawaii, where he lived for years, also a long-time CIA assassination training camp location. Who funded his worldwide trip in 1975? This penniless young man visited Japan, the UK, Nepal, Korea, Vietnam, and China. Money was never a problem for Chapman. It was never explained where it came from. Somewhere in his mind along the line, his mind was infiltrated, pointing to CIA, Mossad, long experience with using mind-controlling drugs, hypnosis, etc. to program their zombies to eliminate troublemakers like John Lennon, JFK, RFK, MLK, etc. After shooting John Lennon, waiting for the cops to provide protective custody, Chapman, as if on cue, read his copy of Catcher in the Rye, perhaps part of Chapman's hypnotic programming to kill John Lennon. Triggering Chapman with just a few words, a phone call perhaps, is part of such plans. Remember the book, The Manchurian Candidate? Any of y'all read that? Such techniques of manipulation are found there. And how come all the bullets that entered John Lennon's body were on the left side of his body, and Chapman was on the right side? Evidence of a second gunman. The, quote, investigation was absolutely useless. No drug tests, no questioning of Chapman about his zombie-like behavior took place. And who wanted to kill John Lennon? The longtime peace activist himself, enigmatic and at times a bit goofy. Well, remember, the assassination took place in that shadowy time after the election of Ronald Reagan over Jimmy Carter before he took office. Many valid questions were raised here that indicate to me that the lone nut theory, once again, is only part of a much larger cover-up. Thanks, yes, our government is run by a bunch of sociopathic criminals devoted to death and destruction. Stop the killing. Thank you.
We are faced with the scientific dictatorships of the future.
We live in an insane society.
If you are going to control any population for any length of time, you must bring in an element of getting people to consent to what is happening to them.
Our society is developing more and more in the direction of a thought police that control every thought we have.